Imagine this, you are in a high-stakes meeting and your client says, how can we mitigate the risks? And then your team lead goes, I'm not sure we have the bandwidth to execute this. And you're sitting there thinking, mitigate, execute, bandwidth? Well, if you've ever been lost in a project management conversation, you are not alone. But I got you covered, because in this video, I'm going to teach you 20 useful phrases and words that you need to know for a project management conversation. Hi there, I'm Anna Gandrabura, your English and effective communication coach, and this is English for Tech Professionals, a channel where every tech professional, regardless of your job, you can be a graphic designer, you can be a software engineer, a project manager, a recruiter, can improve their English and communication skills to become successful at what they do on the daily basis. Make sure you subscribe to my channel because I post new videos every Friday. So every Friday you have an opportunity to get a free English lesson. Well, let's get started. So 20 words and phrases. I have divided them into 4 categories so that it is easier for you to remember them. First, we're going to learn the words for planning and strategy. Then we will learn the words for execution and teamwork. Then we're going to learn the words for client communication. And finally, we are going to learn the words and phrases for performance and risk management. So let's start with the first category, which is planning and strategy. The first word is scope. What is scope? Scope is boundaries of a project or the amount of work that you have on a project, right? So how to use this word in a sentence? You can say, before we get started with our project, let's define the scope. What do you hear here? It's an expression. Let's define the scope. Let's define the scope. Let's tell exactly what the scope is. Define a definition, right? You probably know the word definition because when you study English, you use it a lot. When you want to ask your teacher, for example, what is the definition of this word, right? The definition is a noun and it comes from a verb to define, right? To give a definition, to tell exactly what it is. The second word, when you talk about planning the project, is deliverable. Deliverable is the result that you expect of a task or the project. Here's an example how you can use the word deliverable in your sentence. In a project management meeting, for example, you can say, the deliverable for this sprint is a working prototype. Great, right? Word number 3, milestone. Milestone means a significant event in your project timeline. So for example, you are building an app and let's say your next milestone is getting 100 active users, for example, right? So the milestone, the next thing you're going to achieve in the project development, this is a milestone. Word number 4 is a stakeholder. A stakeholder is anyone related to the project, literally anyone. So a stakeholder can be a team who is developing the app, for example, a client who ordered the team to develop the app, a project manager, a software engineer, an HR who is hiring people for this project, literally anyone. So a stakeholder, like I said, a lot of times people think that a stakeholder means a client. Not really. A stakeholder is anyone related to the project that you're working on. For example, you can say we need stakeholder approval before launching. And finally, word number 5 of the first category of strategy and planning words is feasibility. Feasibility is how something is possible or how something is practical. For example, you can say, let's run a feasibility test to see if this feature works. So the word feasibility, or there is an adjective, feasible. These words are really popular in project management conversations because when we're talking about managing the projects, you really want to check feasibility before promising a certain feature to your client, right? Because if you run a feasibility check, again, this is an expression that you want to write down in your notebooks, run a feasibility check, but because if you don't run a feasibility check and then you promise your client features that you can't really execute on, I think this can be a problem. Section 1 is done. Moving on to section 2. And in the meantime, I want you to tell me in the comments if you have already learned any new words or expressions from section 1, because I have 5 more words and expressions that you can use when talking about execution and when talking about teamwork. And the first word is bandwidth. I mentioned this word at the very beginning of the video. Now I'm going to tell you what it means. Bandwidth means the capacity to take on more work or to do more work. And the way we use this word is in an expression to have the bandwidth to do something. For example, you can say, I don't have the bandwidth to do this right now. Let's say if your colleague or your manager asks you to do something, asks you to take on another task, right? To do another task, but you don't have the capacity, right? So you can say, unfortunately, I don't have the bandwidth to do it this month, for example. So write down, have the bandwidth, right? Have the bandwidth. The next word is bottleneck. A bottleneck is a problem that slows things down. And here's an interesting thing. Try using the word bottleneck instead of the word problem to sound more professional. Because when you use the word problem, it sounds like the end of the world. But when you use the word bottleneck, it sounds that you have something that slows things down, but you can solve it, right? It's not the end of the world. So using the word bottleneck, first of all, will make you sound more professional and more advanced in English, right? Than using the word problem. And also, you're not going to scare your clients and the rest of your team that you have a big problem and it's really, really bad. One more word that I mentioned at the very beginning of the video, to mitigate. Remember I said the client asks, can we mitigate the risk, right? What does mitigate mean? To mitigate means to reduce the risk, right? To mitigate the risk, to reduce the risk. For example, you can say, we can mitigate the delay on this project by adding a backup developer, for example. You don't always have to say mitigate the risk. You can say mitigate the problems or delays, for example, and use this word again to sound more professional and more advanced in English. Word number 9 is, I'm sure you know this word, but I'm not sure if you know there are 2 ways to say this word. Listen to it right now. This one you probably know.
Agile.
How about this one?
Agile.
Agile, agile. Agile, agile. So the British version is agile. The American version is agile. It's up to you. Use either, okay? But what does it mean? Agile means a flexible approach to managing the project, right? So for example, you can say, let's stay agile when building this app, for example, right? To be agile or to be agile, agile is an adjective. As a project manager, you probably know more about this term than I do. Maybe I know something. I used to be a project manager as well. This is where I learned the importance of all these words and expressions. And I had to translate them to our development team who didn't speak good English, you see? So I had to be very agile. That's another way to use this word in a sentence. And finally, word number 10, and we are halfway through, right? Halfway through. Word number 10 is a roadmap. A roadmap is your strategic plan of the project, right? For example, you can say a roadmap for our project consists of 3 phases, right? It's planning, development, and launching, for example. Alrighty, let's talk about communication and client management. And the first word I want to teach you is buy-in. What do you think it means? Buy-in. Buy-in means an agreement you want to get from others. Usually you want to get an agreement, you want to get buy-in from stakeholders, right? Or from a client or from your CEO. For example, you can say, we need buy-in from our CEO before we can move forward. Word number 12 is consensus. Consensus means general agreement among a group. For example, you can say, after our discussion, we reached a consensus on the deadline. Now, here is a useful expression, to reach a consensus, 3 words, okay? By the way, when I say there is a useful expression, and if I specify that it is an expression, and also if you learn expression from other sources, not just from my videos, but I'm really grateful that you're watching my videos and learning from me. When you're learning expressions, make sure you memorize all the words in this expression because you have to use all of them. Otherwise, it's not going to be an expression anymore. So if we want to talk about reaching a consensus, you need three words. Reach a consensus. Word number 13, to align, a verb, right? A verb number 13, to align means to be on the same page. I hope you already know the phrase to be on the same page. I have probably talked about it in one of my previous videos, to be on the same page, to be aligned, right? So here's another way to say to be on the same page, to think similarly, to understand things on the similar level, to align on something. Again, here is a useful expression, to align on something. Are we aligned on this? For example, you can ask your team after discussing some issue or some question, and at the end of the discussion, just making sure you are on the same page. You can say, are we on the same page? But also now you can say, are we aligned on this? Pivot. A pivot or to pivot means a major change in the direction, in where we go on the project. If you observe any market changes, you need to pivot, right? So to pivot is a verb. So this is how you say, after observing all the market changes, we need to pivot. This is what I did, by the way. Back in the day, I started as an entrepreneur, a founder of an English school for everyone. But then I saw a change in the market and I decided I need to pivot. And I pivoted and I created English for IT, a language school that helps tech professionals just like you improve their English and communication skills for work. If you want to learn more about English for IT courses that my team and I have created over these years, I will leave more information about our top, most popular courses in the description on this video. You check it out and let me know if you have any questions. And finally, one more word that you can use when talking about communication and client management is to escalate. To escalate means to raise a serious issue to higher management, right? Let's say when something happens, not pleasant, you need to talk to big bosses. This is what you do. You escalate it, right? So for example, let's say you are working with a developer who is not doing a great job and can't fix this bug, and it's been days. And you can say, if this bug doesn't get fixed, we will need to escalate it. Moving on to our final section 4, risk and performance management words. And the first word I want to highlight here in this section is KPI. KPI stands for Key Performance Indicator. I'm pretty sure you know what KPI means, but I want you to remember that when you say this acronym in English, make sure you say it as separate letters in the alphabet. KPI. KPI. KPI is a measurable goal in the project, right? So for example, we can say the main KPI for us on this project is the number of users. Word number 17 is to leverage. To leverage is to use something to gain advantage. We can leverage AI to improve project's efficiency. Word number 18, dependencies. Dependencies are tasks that depend on each other. For example, you can say we can't start development until we have the design ready. So they are dependencies, right? So design and development, they are dependencies. So that's how you use this word. Next is risk assessment, right? When you evaluate potential problems and risks on the project. So you can say that a risk assessment can help us understand potential delays or can help us see potential delays. I'm pretty sure you do risk assessment when getting down to a new project. And finally, last but not least, retrospective. Retrospective is a review of what went well and what didn't go well. So you usually hold a retrospective meeting, for example, after a sprint or after you launch something or after you complete part of your project work sprint again, right? So you have a retrospective. Retrospectives are my favorite. For example, with my team, every time we host a webinar, we have a retrospective where we discussed what went well during this webinar and what didn't go well but can be improved next time. This is a game changer. A game changer, this changes everything, right? This is a game changer because it allows us to see how and where we can improve. Remember, I promised a special challenge. All right, so here's your special challenge and your special task. I want you to pick 3 words from the words that I have discussed in this video, and I want you to create your sentences with these words or phrases and share them in the comments. This is it for now. Thanks for watching English for Tech Professionals. Thanks for being with me. I'll see you next time.